They said she was just a sweet old woman with a stubborn streak and too many stories. That's what the nurse whispered as she adjusted the four, her tone light, her eyes on the clock, not on the woman in the bed. Colonel. Huh. The nurse had smirked, almost playfully. Sure you were. Danica Rhodes didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her eyes, storm gray and steady even at 72, drifted up toward the top shelf where a sealed mahogany box sat untouched. It hadn't been opened since the day it was delivered, decades ago, to a woman who never cared for applause. But after she passed quietly one March morning, someone finally cracked it open. Inside, a medal they didn't recognize. One even the nurse had to ask Google about. And a letter, yellowed at the edges, bearing a signature in sharp ink, General M. Anders, Joint Special Operations Command. The room went quiet. History had been sleeping in plain sight. And all she had ever asked for was to be believed. So before we begin, if you believe that some people should never have to prove themselves twice, if you agree that courage doesn't always wear the uniform people expect, like and subscribe, because this story, it deserves to be remembered. It started in a small Tennessee town, summer of 2009, where the Army recruiting office sat between a pawn shop and a payday loan center. Danica was 19, wiry, sharp-boned, with calloused hands from farm work and a stare that made people shift. She had been training alone in the mornings for months, lifting sandbags instead of weights, sprinting power lines instead of tracks. The recruiters usually looked bored, until someone like Danica walked in. She stepped over the threshold wearing scuffed running shoes and a loose hoodie damp with sweat. No makeup. No smile. Just a folded paper in her hand, the infantry enlistment request she had already filled out. Behind the desk sat Staff Sergeant Craig Tomlin, belly half tucked into his belt, eyes skimming her figure like a punchline he'd already told. Combat arms, he chuckled, not even hiding the disbelief. You sure you're in the right building? Danica nodded. Positive. He leaned back in his chair, gave a mock-inspecting glance, and gestured to her form. Sweetheart, he said, chewing a toothpick like punctuation, this ain't G.I. Jane. This is real. She didn't blink. Exactly. The room went silent for a second. Then he laughed. Tell you what, we'll start you with desk admin, help the machine move. Maybe communications if you're lucky. You'd be good at answering radios. Danica's jaw stayed clenched, but her voice was steady. I didn't come here to answer calls. Tomlin raised an eyebrow. Well, you're not getting a rifle. Rules are rules. Be back next week. Maybe with more realistic expectations. He dropped her form in the reject pile. Didn't even stamp it. She picked it up without a word, folded it slowly, then walked out the same way she came in, quiet, upright, focused. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't rant. She ran, 10 miles before dawn. In boots. With a backpack full of bricks. Because while he was laughing, she was preparing. That summer, she reapplied 4 more times, each time rerouted, delayed, or told to try something more fitting. And still, she kept going. She found an out-of-state recruiter, a female captain who'd rotated from Afghanistan, who didn't flinch when Danica said, I want to lead fire teams. That woman didn't laugh. She handed her a waiver form and said, then prove you can survive selection. And never stop moving. Danica left that office the same way she left Tomlin's. Quiet. Upright. Focused. The following year she graduated from basic with honors. By 2012, she was embedded in Forward Operating Base Takurgar. First woman in her unit. Not that anyone noticed, they were too busy following her lead through terrain that made lesser men fold. And yet, even then, there were whispers. She didn't engage them. She let her actions talk. 12 missions. 3 citations. No injuries on her watch. But back home, Tomlin was still recruiting. Still laughing. Still forgetting the names he pushed away. Until 2023. When a ceremony was held at the Pentagon, closed to media, but not to memory. When Colonel Danica Rhodes, hair silvering at the temples and medals glinting like truth no one could rewrite, stepped onto that stage and finally, saw Tomlin in the crowd. Retired now. Sitting stiff in a dress shirt a size too tight. Their eyes met. No salute was ordered. But he gave one anyway. No one told him to. He just stood. Because in that moment, even the one who dismissed her first had to acknowledge what she had become. And Danica? She returned the gesture, sharp and precise, the same way she'd always lived, not for applause, not for revenge. Just for the job done right. There's a certain kind of silence in military life that doesn't feel empty, it feels earned. Danica Rhodes learned that in her first year stationed overseas, where the terrain didn't care what gender you were and the mission didn't wait for apologies. She arrived at FOB Takur Gar in 2012, the only woman on her recon team, unnoticed by most and underestimated by all. Her cot was placed closest to the exit, unofficially, in case things got messy. No one said it out loud, but the implication was clear. She didn't argue. She just unpacked her bag, folded her uniform with methodical precision, and made sure her rifle was cleaned twice as often as regulation required. The first few weeks were a study in isolation. Conversations shifted when she entered the tent. Jokes stopped mid-sentence. Someone once called her soft after seeing her writing in a small journal at Chow. She didn't react. But the next morning, she was the first to volunteer for a night patrol up Ridge 8, a position known for its loose gravel, poor visibility, and history of ambush. No one else stepped forward. Danica walked it solo. Quietly. When she returned, sun rising behind her, dust caked to her boots, one of the lieutenants mumbled, "She actually did it." And something small shifted. They still didn't offer conversation, but they no longer joked when she spoke. That winter, the base was rocked by a perimeter breach, a misread movement pattern that almost cost them an entire west sector. Danica had caught it the night before. She had written a 3-line warning in the ops log, suggesting a shift in infrared scans. It had been ignored. After the breach, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just recalibrated the scans herself and sent a silent report up the chain. A week later, her superior, a tired major with too many scars to pretend anymore, placed a small, unmarked patch on her desk. "You see patterns the rest of us miss," he said. "Use that." And from then on, they started listening. She was deployed 4 times in 7 years, led over 20 operations, saved lives that never made the papers. There was no press conference, no headline, but there were letters, stashed in her locker, folded, sweat-stained, typed in uneven keystrokes, from privates and corporals who had followed her lead through the worst of it. "I didn't believe in female command until you," one wrote. "You made me look harder at what leadership actually is." She never replied, never pinned them on a wall, just carried them, like she carried her quiet, always watching, always calculating. In 2016, during Operation Ember Ridge, her team was pinned under crossfire in a valley no GPS could navigate. Communications were cut. Dust choked every signal. Free soldiers were injured. One was lost behind enemy line of sight. Command ordered to fall back. Danica refused. She rerouted the team by compass and memory, used a burn flare against protocol to draw the enemy's eye long enough to extract the wounded. When backup arrived, she was still there, covering the rear, low on rounds, refusing to leave the last man behind. She earned a commendation for that mission. But what she kept was the recovered dog tag of the soldier she pulled out, Lance Corporal Romero, the only one who called her ma'am, without sarcasm from day one. She kept it in her boot. And when she rotated back stateside, no one met her at the gate. No balloons, no brass band, just a folded itinerary in a bus. She preferred it that way. She requested a desk post, not for comfort, but because she knew the system still forgot people like her unless they were present to be impossible to ignore. She rewrote safety protocols, designed threat recon models, trained 3 cohorts of female soldiers who all said the same thing. "I didn't know we were allowed to be this strong." Every time she heard that, she felt the faint echo of a laugh in the back of her mind. Tumlin, still out there, still signing forms, still reducing dreams to pamphlets. Once, she saw his name on an internal email list, part of a recruiting seminar hosted at HQ. She didn't click it, just marked it, mentally, like a page folded for later. She knew he wouldn't remember her, but that didn't matter, because she wasn't building a moment. She was building a legacy, and the thing about legacies? They don't knock. They wait, quietly, until it's time to walk in. The Pentagon's Hall of Valor is quieter than you'd think. Not solemn like a cemetery, not majestic like a cathedral, but something in between, like the air knows it's carrying the weight of stories most people never got to hear. And that day, 2023, it carried one more. The boots clicking down that marbled corridor didn't belong to a general. Not exactly. They belonged to Colonel Danica Rhodes, her dress uniform pressed to regulation, her silver hair pulled back with the same precision she'd once used to line up night patrols. Every thread on her shoulder spoke of experience earned, not granted, and every ribbon on her chest came with the kind of story she never volunteered, because people never believed them the first time. Inside the briefing room, top brass had gathered for a closed recognition. No press, no speeches, just people who knew what to look for. Danica stood at the front of the room, flanked by junior officers, her citation already printed. She was being honored for rewriting asymmetric threat doctrine based on field patterns she had once jotted down in a write-in-the-rain notebook, the same one that used to get laughed at in the barracks. But that wasn't the moment that mattered. Not yet. Because in the back row, dressed in a stiff blue blazer and tie he barely fit into anymore, sat Staff Sergeant Craig Tomlin, retired. He had been invited, not for honor, but for context. His son, now an Army cadet, had nominated him for a seat. Figured he could see how the next generation leads, he'd written. Tomlin hadn't expected Danica, hadn't remembered her name when he read the agenda. But when she stepped into the light, spine straight, eyes calm, and looked directly at him, his face turned to stone. Not from fear, from memory, from the sudden, awful realization that he had once smirked at the woman the room was now standing for. The ceremony moved with quiet dignity. A citation was read, a commendation delivered. Danica saluted the general with the kind of precision that didn't need to prove anything anymore. But when the floor opened for acknowledgments, she asked for the podium. Just briefly. The room waited. She spoke plainly. When I joined, someone told me I wasn't built for combat, that I'd be answering radios at a desk. I've answered calls, yes, but they weren't for coffee or communication. They were for air support, evac, reinforcement, and not once did I hesitate to pick them up. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. What they didn't understand, she continued, was that I didn't want to be seen. I wanted to serve. And sometimes that's the louder legacy. She stepped back. Silence followed. And then, from the rear of the room, something unexpected. Tomlin stood. Slowly, awkwardly. He straightened his jacket, hesitated, and saluted. The kind of crisp, sharp, wordless salute that meant only one thing. I was wrong. The room didn't clap. It didn't need to. That gesture said more than any apology ever could. Danica returned the salute. No malice. No pride. Just precision. As she turned to exit, a young soldier waiting at the door asked, "Ma'am, is it true you used to carry mission maps in your boots?" She gave the faintest smile. Only the ones command didn't believe in. Outside, a breeze pushed down the National Mall, soft and steady. She paused under the granite arch, watching tourists gather near the reflection pool. History, she knew, didn't always record everything, but sometimes it circled back. Sometimes it made you walk past the people who once laughed and made them watch you lead. The next morning, Tomlin sent a message. Not through official channels. Just a short-handwritten note left at the honor wall. It read, "I got it wrong, but I never forgot your face. I only wish I'd paid attention to your conviction, not your hoodie." Danica read it during coffee, tucked it in the back of her notebook, and went back to work, because she never did this for the spotlight. Only to prove one truth. When the world doubts your voice, let your footsteps do the talking. And now, every year, new cadets at that same recruiting center hear the story of a woman who walked in, asked for combat, got laughed at, and made the Pentagon stand. Not because she demanded the title, but because she earned the salute.